intimidates me a lot because she runs Ironmans and she's crazy. But anyway, I'm going to read what's actually on the script. Yeah, she's I'm one of her biggest fans. Stacey's an IT specialist security at the National Institute for Standards of Technology. Used to be. She left that just so she could come join us at this conference. I'm gonna lie myself that way. She specializes in risk assessment and vulnerability testing, focusing on cloud security initiatives. Stacey holds various certifications, include CISP, CRISC, SC, CCO, CSM, as well as the MBA and MS in network security and a BS in computer science. Welcome, Stacey. Thank you for coming.
Join the peanut gallery. Never mind. Yes, that. My God. Okay, this might work. Maybe not. That's kind of small. All these certifications and stuff, and still, projectors are a pain. Don't judge me. I'm better at security than I am dealing with projectors. Hey. Maybe? Yes. Okay. So, I've been a compliance specialist pretty much since the federal government rolled out FISMA back in 2002. For those of you not in the government sector, it's what's used to be called the Federal Information Management Security Act. And this is what gave NIST the directive to begin doing all the cybersecurity standards and basically setting our baseline for what security metrics, well, not the metrics, but the processes that we use in security. Why does this hate me? And at least my background's pretty. This is not working for me. So, anyway. This doesn't want to comply. So I've been dealing with compliance for a decent amount of time. I don't want to consider how long that is at this point. So we have a problem with compliance. And now most people tend to think that our security problems are all cyber and hackers and 0 days and all these sexy hot vulnerabilities. That's a portion of it. But it's not everything. Because we still need compliance. Compliance is, as most people look at it, it's a necessary evil. They don't want to do it. They really don't like spending the money. And, you know, there's so many of them. However, compliance does have its place. But the real problem is, and, okay, my real problem is that the projector does not like me. Hey, Tim.
Go team. Oh, you're on HDMI?
HDMI. Okay. So, anyone that's known me for a while has known one of my things is compliance is not security. Compliance is just the beginning of security. This is our baseline that we start with. So this is something that's even called out in the latest revision 4 of the NIST 853. And compliance is not about adhering to static checklists or generating unnecessary FISMA reporting paperwork. Rather, compliance necessitates organizations executing due diligence with regard to information security and risk management. This is not liking me. I'm changing the adapter. We'll see if that works. We'll do it this way. So what this means is using our compliance baselines. This allows us to have a commonality across systems, regardless of where you are, where we know what you're using for your security settings and standards. This helps us so that, if my company has a moderate rated system and I want to work with your company and establish a level of trust between our networks, and you're also rated at a moderate, leveraging these baselines, I know what you have done to secure your system, which gives me that capability to have a warm and fuzzy feeling that you've managed some level of compliance. I'm not going to be terribly fearful that your system is letting in all the evils of the world. It's still a very big possibility because, again, this is only where we should be starting from. We need to go far above and beyond just base compliance. But sadly, our reality is most systems out there, they've been breached. Consider OPM. This has been, all this has been exposed. So much data. The attackers have been in there for years before it was exposed that this had happened. So we have these security policies, procedures, and all this stuff is implemented. The latest, greatest firewalls. But this still isn't stopping the attackers. Our castles are still being attacked. Our moat is failing. We might as well just pave it over at this point, right? Burn the internet to the ground and start again, right? Let's make it great again. Because obviously what we're doing isn't working. And a lot of this is just misconception, too, of what we do in information security. Now, I'm sure all of you know exactly where we are. We're down here, we're the cat on the laptop, pretending we know what we're doing, and we're trying to put out fires as best as we can, but we don't have opposable thumbs at this point. So, we're fighting these misconceptions that, we have all these awesome things going for us, and it's an uphill battle because we're not magicians. We need the management buy-in. That's key. But, we also need them to understand that we can't just attack this in terms of, things like a checkbox mentality, which is the way pretty much every compliance method is implemented at this point. Okay, I got to do PCI, I got to do HIPAA, SOX. You name it. It's a frickin' checkbox list is the way we're attacking it. Okay, I need a firewall, I need someone to come in, do an audit. Who cares what they say? I got my paperwork. Rubber stamp me, I'm good to go. That's not how it works. We need to go more in depth. What does it truly mean to have all of our security implementations, done right? What, am I getting too sassy for you? I thought I was kind of channeling Dan here. If I'm too sassy, you can step back a couple rows. So in fighting this, we need to look in terms of not just what's the bare minimum we can do, because I have 5 compliances and I got to spend money on all this. Well, you don't have to do everything over and over again. A lot of it is, having the knowledge to leverage what you already have, and then, just putting that into your other reports. A lot of it is not reinventing the wheel. There is similarity across all of our compliance that we have to do. And, of course, one of our other things is we do tend to have adversarial relationships between, our defense and our attack sides when we're doing all of our security assessments. We need to be working more in conjunction with each other, because it's not a, oh, you did bad, I'm going to go tell mom. We don't want to continue this one-upmanship across our fields. CERT is there to help us, keep the bad things off of the network when it occurs. Go hunt down our malware, clear out the systems. And then our risk assessment teams, we're there to defend. Make sure we have things in place properly. Preferably before the systems go online, but that doesn't always happen. Because, as everyone here is well aware, development doesn't always include us from the beginning when they have this great idea of, let's make this new application. Great, where's security? Well, 2 months later, you get called into a project management meeting, and they're talking about, so this is an extra 2-week delay, right? You guys can get it done in 2 weeks, because I got a deadline to get this out to my customers. Yeah, I've had those meetings. I've had those conversations to get security put back into the overall plan. It's an uphill battle if they don't understand, and it's even worse if your higher management won't back you on pushing back. So, regardless of where you stand within security, we all have to work at educating the rest. It's not that fun, but, get some animated people like, me, Johnny, Biz, Yes, I'm including you in that. And exactly. We're happy to educate them on the errors of their ways. Because right now, this is pretty much the way security feels at times. We're dodging bullets. And it's not always that easy to do. Because regardless of what you've done, you might have the latest, greatest firewall out there. You've upgraded to the most hotshot antivirus. You know what? It doesn't matter. All of our attackers, they're going to find a way to get in because, well, here's the thing. We still have a lot of the same security issues. And compliance can kind of help with this. Because these are the things that compliance is setting for us as baselines that we should be, going through, implementing this, and preventing, another day, another attack, same old shit. Because that's what it boils down to. All of our old things still are effective attack vectors right now. People, you are the weakest link. Social engineering is the best way to get into anything. I don't care where you work. There is someone that is going to just talk about your network setup, what you have, where your weakness is. Hey, people talk. People try to be friendly. And it's amazing what you can get out of people just sitting down and talking to them over a beer or two. Or just saying hi when you go talk to a vendor, at a conference too. It works in multiple directions. So now a lot of that is just being aware and having your personnel educated as far as don't do stupid shit. But a lot of that is understanding what is actually valuable and actionable information that an outsider could utilize. So that one's kind of a really hard one to come up against. Patching, that should pretty much be a no-brainer, but we see it again and again, and you'll see on the next slide just how much of an issue that is. But malware, our people are going to click on links. They're going to go to sites they shouldn't go to, because some people don't have enough work when they're at work during the day. And unfortunately, busy work doesn't always resolve that issue. So, policies, procedures, locking systems down, following up, and, just having a follow-through, making it an issue as far as cleaning out things. But having the appropriate common setting can also help to decrease the occurrence. It's not guaranteed, because it still depends on people to actually implement things. And as I said, all of our old attack vectors, they still work. I mean, think about your typical espionage. You think things like James Bond. But business espionage has been around since the beginning of time. If you can get a foot up on your competition, that's money. And all the same old tips and tactics, they still work. And this chart here is taken from the Verizon DBIR from the other year. And this shows you the years from which the CVEs are from, that they found in terms of use of frequency. You have stuff going back to 1999 that's being used successfully to attack systems. Patching is clearly an issue that we still have. Obviously you're going to get off cycle when things get busy. You got to get a product out, you got to do updates for various things. Sometimes you're running a little behind. But if you've got stuff coming out from well over a decade ago that's being used against you, you kind of have an issue, and you kind of have things that you might want to look a little closer at, putting a couple extra security measures between you and the internet, if not straight out pulling it off of the internet. Just saying. Because this kind of stuff, it leaves you a little frustrated. But what is our problem with this? Obviously, we don't get buy-in because management doesn't see that there's a real return on investment for this. But, I don't know. We're kind of like an insurance policy. We're not necessarily cheap, but, having your security professionals and good security tools, we make a pretty good return on investment. We just need to, work on proving it. Because it's really, really cheap to run a botnet right now. And it's amazing what you can find on the internet. In terms of social engineering, there's also open source intelligence. Who here has looked at a government RFP? Consider the information that's out there in terms of, hey, we've got a solicitation out, we need, 200 Windows boxes, and these firewalls, this network gear. All of a sudden, the kind of stuff they're going to be deploying on their system. Oh, you might have to wait a year for this to be viable, but chances are they've got other stuff very similar to that. And you know what? Old RFPs are still out there on the internet too. So if you go digging through the archives, it's a frickin' gold mine. It's amazing the stuff that the internet can bring to you, both good and bad. You just have to think a little evil, and a lot of interesting stuff. And pretexting, this falls under our lovely social engineering. We're always pretending to be people we're not. Hey, we need you to go do this stuff. Okay, let me just Google that. It's pretty easy. So, part of the reasons that we are failing at this, look at all the breaches we've had. Yeah. Home Depot, for example, Target, we've had PCI compliance. That is not the be-all, end-all. OPM, they had FSMA compliance. Again, not the be-all, end-all for making sure that people within the system didn't make bad choices and didn't fully secure the entire setup. So, part of this is we have, lack of measurement and really lack of accountability at times, because when you start treating it as simply a bunch of paperwork and it's just a paper drill, it loses meaning. People don't go through and evaluate it, or you go through and you do an interview session with your technicians without testing some of the controls. Because, well, if you've got a network of 200 systems, you're going to end up doing some spot checks, because not everything out there is automated. So what this leads you to is having gaps in your security reviews. And these are the gaps that our attackers are finding before we're finding them and fixing them. So just having that lack of accountability, lack of measuring. There are more systems that are coming out in terms of giving our leadership insight into their return on investment as far as, okay, we had these issues, this many have been closed, and not just general like help desk tickets, but in terms of, yes, we had 50 vulnerabilities, technicians have, resolved these, we still have this much that's out there. So it's, management likes pie charts. This is how we get money. That's the brutal truth of it. And, I'm pretty sure this crowd is also good on the issues as far as having certifications, but not the actual working knowledge and experience to back it up. So we do have a lot of people that, you're getting certifications, moving into the field. That's fabulous. It gives a baseline, but we also just need to improve that hands-on experience, do some mentorships with more experienced personnel in the field so that, there's less falling through the gap, less missing the important stuff. And part of that is just, once in a while we need to think like bad guys. Because it's fun. I've been working defense side of this since I started doing IT. So it's all about securing our systems. But you can't really secure them if you don't think about how they're getting in. So you have to be a little devious. Right? So going forward to try and solve the problem, a lot of times, they're just going for the warm and fuzzies. If you're just having someone come in and do an assessment and all they're doing is, running a Nessus scan against your network, you don't need an outside company for that. You can do that yourself. And you should be doing similar things with vulnerability assessments running on a reoccurring basis. This is the only way you're going to see things when, patches don't get applied, there's new stuff out there, or they updated something which rolled back other patches. So now you're seeing old issues crop up. Or it installed an old version of .NET. Oh, come on. Of course, this would happen close to the end. Close enough. I'm almost done, so this is close enough. So, we need to remove the checkbox mentality and work it through as full consideration. We don't want to do the base minimum. We want to use this as a starting point and add to it. And also, we need to look at it in terms of, are we implementing the right things for us? Just because the latest, greatest stuff is out there, do we really need to switch to different technology? Do we have to implement something just because, a sales guy comes along, hey, this is great. You should switch over to our antivirus. Well, that might not be what works best for the way your network is set up. You have to do a full evaluation of it. Part of this is actually evaluating what you have on your systems. Not all data is created equal. And this goes beyond just consideration for, is it classified, is it unclassified, is it company confidential? Do you have trade secrets? Everyone has intellectual property of some sort that you want to keep out of your competitors' hands. Even if it's something as simple as, hey, I don't want my competing company to get my client list and my bill rate, because then they know exactly how to undercut me. And this is the easy shit. So seriously, it's just thinking about it in terms of what value is it really for your data. It's not all saving the world. Sometimes it's just saving your ass. And This goes along with, is it safety versus security? You know, safety, this is where it's going to impact someone's life. You know, if you're looking at a hospital system, you know, this is stuff that if it's hacked, it could impact whether someone gets the appropriate blood type, the appropriate medication. Are they going to get something that they're allergic to? This is shit that needs to be considered highly. You know, versus basic, well, you know, am I just securing, you know, like, well, payroll is still important, but not as much as people not dying. So, and policies. We always need policies because, honestly, yes, it's boring. But it's a necessary evil because this says what we can and cannot do, and it holds people accountable. So when they screw up, you have actionable cause to go back against them because they agreed to it. So I'm Stacey Banks. This is my Twitter handle. If you have questions, feel free to ask me, and that's pretty much it. And hopefully you were entertained. Yes?
On the issue of cert versus experience, do you think we need to hold cert vendors more accountable for the certs? If you can go and get a cert in a week, I feel like that cert isn't really valid, and people tack on like 37 letters at the end of their signature block because they have their G10, their GCIH, etc. But don't need anything anymore because they're so easy to get. If we as an industry stop getting them, I feel like we can send a message, hey, you need to make those better. What do you think?
Okay. So the question was in terms of the glut of certifications versus there not being actual accountability, too much accountability behind them. You know, do we need to hold these certification vendors, you know, kind of hold them accountable as far as actually issuing these with just a week of training? But that's kind of an uphill battle because we're going against HR is what we're going against. You know, HR and management, they're the ones setting the criteria that you need to have a CISSP, you need to have a GPEN to do this work. And it can be beneficial, it can be a negative as well. I mean, it does set a boundary, but it's a hot topic in our industry because anything that doesn't actually have hands-on technical testing just means you studied well enough to pass the test out of memory. And it doesn't take that much effort. So you can't really hold them, you know, guilty towards issuing them because that's how they designed it. But maybe work towards changing as far as management and HR perspective for what's valuable. It's an uphill battle. No one really likes it.
Follow up is thought as one of the hiring managers, that's what I look at. If I saw you come in, you're young enough, and it took you 2 weeks to get the classes, I would look at it differently than if he or I showed up with all the gray hair. You know, I've been in the industry a little over 20 years now. If I couldn't pass the A+ test walking in full, there's probably, you know, some concern on my boss's part for me to have my job. So, you got to look at the hiring management. As an industry, security people need to work with blue people saying, hey, what do we do when we hire these guys? Do we have practical tests? I do. Because letters behind your name mean something to me, but not as much as show me how you think. So if you get hired in my department, you have to go through a practical test. You have to show me what you got. Unrelated to that was, how do we start compliance in a meaningful way? So we have compliance checklists, yeah. Check off boxes. As a blue team member, what would your advice be to me to put meaningful checklists in places?
Well, my biggest heartache has always been not being involved from the beginning and, you know, being brought in more as a Band-Aid at the last minute of, hey, we have this, you know, list of stuff we have to comply with and we don't know what the hell we're doing. Help us. Give us direction because we don't understand government speak. So part of it is getting that early insertion from project initiation and just going through whether or not their original plans are actually going to work. Because, you still have issues in terms of hard-coding passwords, for example, into databases. And by the time it's reached, it's going to take a major rewrite to get them to work in something else. So, really, I would love to see that. Some places are starting to do it, but it's still not universal. We're still treated as a Band-Aid after the fact.
Once you come up with a new argument that I haven't heard before, I've got a hospital that is saying these IP addresses cannot be scanned because they're running the cardiac system, the IV system, and people's lives depend on it. They're too critical to risk you going through and doing a vulnerability assessment. And I say, you think that hackers are going to know the difference? I say, it's still too good. What can I go through and tell the hospital administrator that they haven't heard already that's going to convince them that they need to go through and let us do the vulnerability assessments, do those sorts of things, and develop the defenses so that they can keep their vulnerable systems, but now I'm testing the defenses for those systems and somehow get through them?
Well, towards that, because I've worked at places where we've had those issues, not where it's been that sort of life-threatening level, but part of that is they need to build into their budget having a secondary test network so that you can be hammering against the walls and see what shakes out. Because without having a test bed, and you also want to test all your updates too in the test bed, especially when it's that mission critical and, life sensitive. And this is also where you'll end up, it's like, well, then you can do all your vulnerability scans and say, well, okay, it's not that bad. We can test you once a quarter on the actual production systems. But yeah, they need to start building in as far as having, backup systems. Yep, and that's very common. I promise you, I've seen it everywhere, in government as well. I wish it was different. Yes. Well, actually, I wasn't involved in that. I'm not part of the policy, I actually left NIST last week. So, I have no idea, because I wasn't part of that group. I was actually in the CIO's office for oversight. Yeah. Yes. Well, a lot of that in terms is just, again, picking what actually works for you and your environment. If you're going to be going towards government contracting, and you might end up doing something where you're running a contractor-owned system for the government, especially, then you'd want to start looking at what falls under FSMA. NIST, if you're going civilian, currently DIACAP and risk management framework if you're going DoD systems. But, it's picking what works best for your system and the future. And there's a lot of similarity across the baseline for all the compliance networks. But especially one of the things that's out there is the cybersecurity framework that NIST put out, geared more towards industry. And it's a little more streamlined than the 853 that government agencies fall under. That's not to say that industry likes it any better, but it's not required. But it's something else to use that has less issues to work. Well, less processes to work through. Anyone else? Okay. I think we're done.